All right. Good morning to all of you. Thank you all for being on this session with us today. We're excited to see a lot of familiar names who've been joining us for our previous sessions in this series. So today is going to be a little bit different from what we've been doing. Today is going to be more of a conversation, more of a panel discussion. And we have some great panelists who are here with us today, and I'll get to letting them introduce themselves in just a moment. But they're going to be sharing their experiences in cybersecurity with us today. And we hope that through this panel discussion that you'll be able to learn more about the field of cybersecurity and maybe some ways that you can get into the field or ways that you can learn more, especially for the students who are trying to figure out, what are my next steps, maybe the career paths of some of these women who are on our session today will give you a little bit of insight on the different avenues that you can take to learn more about the field. So as Tiffany admits the rest of our guests onto the call, we're going to go ahead and jump right in. And ladies, I'm going to turn my video off just so it can run a little bit smoother, but if you would leave your video on, that would be helpful just so that they can see the face that's talking. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my video off, and I'm going to stop my screen share so that they can see the different faces that are talking. And then we'll go ahead and get into the introductions, and we'll start the introductions with Margaret because that's who's the first in my screen, the first square in my screen. So Margaret.
Always early for everything.
So if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself,
Sure.
That would be great.
Sure. My name's Margaret Leary. I know a lot of folks at Nova know me as Professor Leary. I do teach in the cybersecurity program. I'm the former chair of the program. My experience has been, of course, I came into teaching and I still consult in the field here. I've got 40 years plus experience in cybersecurity and IT because, of course, cybersecurity wasn't a discipline up until very recently. I always lie when I'm talking to my students and I knock off like 5 years so I don't look like a dinosaur, right? But anyway, a typical IT person. I started back in 1976, I guess, in high school in a programming course. And because I could program, they thought I was a computer operator. And so I became a computer operator, network manager. And I do consult in the DC area. I do security audits and security advising for federal agencies. So.
All right, thank you, Margaret. And before we move on with the introductions, if you put your screen into speaker view, you can actually see one person at a time. So it's not like a bazillion boxes popped up all at once. So that's just a tip to make viewing this a little bit easier for you. But again, thank you, Margaret, for sharing your experience. Now we're going to move on to Wynn. If you could share your experience and kind of give us a little bit of information about yourself.
Hey everybody, my name is Wynn, and I am not an IT or cyber specialist because every time I hear someone says I'm an expert, 10 minutes later, they're no longer relevant. So this is the challenge, but it's an exciting time to be alive. Unlike Professor Margaret here, I have no experience. I can spell IT. I'm actually an attorney by trade, and my background is national security. And you're thinking, why is this lady on our panel? Because it's COVID-19 and your folks really needed a new face, I suppose. My background is really, again, national security with emphasis on aerospace and overhead. So you're like, what is that? That's rockets, that's launch, payloads, which are satellites, and other overhead architecture. Those are all fancy words for space. And about 3 years ago, so let me back up. I have experience both in private sector, which is business, and then in government. And I spent about 10 years, a decade. I know that's a very long time for the young folks on here, on Capitol Hill as a staffer, as counsel on the House Armed Services Committee, House Government Reform Committee, and House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. I went to the private sector for 10 years, and then I got a call, and I basically, because you know, when opportunity knocks, you have to be ready to open the door. And sometimes you try to push that door back and you're like, I don't want this opportunity. But you do it because it's a challenge and you want to serve your country. So I closed up my business and I went into the administration. And for the last 3 years, I was the Deputy Assistant Secretary at the Department of Homeland Security. So you're like DHS. Okay, now we're talking. DHS, as you know, is the largest law enforcement and also civilian. We're the lead for all civil cyber civilian. CISA, as you know, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, they used to have this really weird acronym for a name called NPPD. Nobody could figure out what it was. I used to give briefings and I would just mess up the name. It was National Programs and Policy Directed or something like that. It was very confusing and people were like, what? Why are they in charge of cyber? So that was one of the secretary's directive is we needed to change the name. And you think that's easy enough, but it's not. It's a complicated process. So DHS, we have CISA, we had FEMA, there's ICE, there's CBP. If you don't know these acronyms, I'll slow down. So ICE is Immigration Customs Enforcement. And you're thinking, well, they do a lot of immigration stuff. Actually, pause. They also have this thing called HSI, Homeland Security Investigations, which they do all the criminal elements investigations. We're talking human trafficking, we're talking guns trafficking, drug trafficking. That's all ICE coming into the US. Of course, we have the US Coast Guard, we have FEMA. Oh my goodness, it's like counting all your children and a whole bunch of other agencies, but we can chat more about that later. The bottom line, I think I just went for my intro, and I'm sorry it's so long-winded because I'm unlike some of the other panelists who actually have a solid background in cyber and IT. I think cyber and IT is going to be the foundational layer for all businesses and all governments. We see that on the offensive side as we try to move quickly beyond the 21st century, and we see it on the defensive side, all these bad actors, criminal elements, hackers, opportunists who just want to hack into our systems. You've heard of ransomware. So there are lots of opportunities, and it's a really exciting time. It's just not sitting around, you know, with these little dot matrix printers and programming and coding. I think it's a revolutionary time to be a young person and decide that cyber may be your future. So I'll get off my soapbox now.
No, it's fine. Thank you for sharing. When that was great. I agree that we are moving in a new direction and it's a great time to be getting into cyber. Sharon, we're going to move to you next if you want to introduce yourself.
Okay, my name is Sharon Hardy, and I am a teacher in Prince William County. And cybersecurity, if you would like to be in cybersecurity, you need to be considered a lifelong learner, because things change every day. And as I taught other classes, cybersecurity kept coming up. And so that is what directed me to become a cybersecurity teacher.
Thank you, Sharon.
Yes.
And Jika, thank you for joining us today. It's good to see you again. If you want to share, some of these people on this call probably know you because they've had classes with you, but if you want to share a little bit about yourself, that would be great.
Sure. My name is Jonas, and I just completed the associate's degree cybersecurity program at Northern Virginia Community College, and I graduated this last month in May. And I work at Nova in the IT help desk department. I love my job because it helps me to protect and information, student educational records, and promote security awareness, and as well as help protect victims of cyber related crimes. And also, I'm just happy to be here. It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me, and please let me know if you have any questions.
Great, thank you. Thank you for sharing. I'm glad you're here. So I know that we're just going to jump right into the questions. I know that some of you shared kind of how you got in the field, but maybe what was that one thing that got you interested? What was that turning point or that defining moment that got you interested in cybersecurity? And for you, Wynn, in your case, it's kind of the intelligence side, the security intelligence side. What was that defining moment? And anyone can start, whoever would like to go first.
So I will take a stab at it. I think generationally, IT has just grown at such an, it's not even evolutionary, it's at such a revolutionary speed. I've only been working for 2.5+ decades, but the reality is IT, when I started out, had a different connotation, if you will. And it was, you know, the back end server rooms, it's your nerdy guys who you call and you say, hey, my computer's not working, or my BlackBerry, or we used to call it the Crackberry, is not working. And so now it's a whole different ball game. I ended up doing, I think, the hardest job that I've ever had with no experience in any type of IT background is when I took the job at the House Armed Services Committee as majority counsel. And the program portfolio was $27 billion of the Department of Defense's IT programs. So we're talking all your geeky stuff from your business programs about how people are paid, human resource systems, all the way up to tactical radios, satellites, hard stuff, and then of course the special stuff that go into various weapon systems. And I am a liberal arts major. I would have to ask people, can you draw this out for me? And can you use stick figures? I don't want to see any PowerPoints. And they would draw things, or they would do PowerPoints. I take them to the chairman and I flip them through and they talk through, and the chairman's like, I don't understand. And I didn't have the wherewithal. And I had to educate myself in my off time. And then it pretty much became like a pad. And they would have these fancy slides with all these lightning bolts going everywhere. And I remember the chairman turned to me, he goes, what's with the lightning bolts? Why are we trying to kill our own soldiers? And I'm like, no. So this is an example of like where it's too fancy. But the bottom line is you have to have some basic understanding of how IT cybersecurity works before you can start formulating policy and making decisions about what programs to cut, what programs to add, what programs to nurture. So it's really, I think, a self-learning process for most of us.
Yeah, I'll pick up on that here. I just want to point out that bear in mind that when I started in my career, cybersecurity wasn't a separate discipline; it was other duties as assigned. And so, I agree that having that IT foundation is absolutely critical. But from my perspective, when I realized that there was cyber or security out there, was when I walked in. I was a network manager at Edwards Air Force Base. And I had realized that someone the night before had attempted to hack into my system. And of course, at first, you're very insulted that somebody would even try to do that. But in the process of doing that, I realized that that's what I enjoyed. I enjoyed defending my systems. I enjoyed doing the planning for the security, the incident response plans, the security plans, risk assessments, which was really just sort of, becoming words and policies that people were starting to think about here. So security was already being infused into IT here. I wanted to touch on something Sharon had said though too. She said, and you had also touched on this, and that, this is a field. I remember a study that said that every 2 years, 60% of your existing technical skills become obsolete. And so it is absolutely critical that the individuals who are considering this field prepare themselves for, that constantly having to re-engineer their skills, re-engineer themselves, and change who and what they think they are, and keep up with everything, keep up with new regulations, threats, trends, anything, and how that's shaping cybersecurity.
Yes, because cyber, for a long time, we only focused on computers. And now with the digital world, there's so many opportunities for hackers to take on. So I thought it was important for me to help my students understand cyber awareness. And with them being on social media, they just having fun. So that sparked me to offer cybersecurity at my high school.
I was taking classes at Nova, general studies classes, and I came across this program called Year Up. Year Up is a 1-year career development program. It's a very great, amazing program that helped me to jumpstart my career and provided incredible support. And during this time, I also had the opportunity to be a part of the program called Perscolas. Perscolas is another technical program for young adults, and where I gained some technical knowledge in cybersecurity. So that's how I started being interested in cybersecurity and decided to complete my associate's degree. And now I'm thinking about, not thinking, I actually applied to a few universities in the area to complete the bachelor's degree in cybersecurity and continue to pursue higher education.
Well, that's awesome. So many follow-up questions to some of the things that you all mentioned, but one that I want to touch on is several of you talked about how the field is constantly changing. Margaret, you said when you first got into IT, cyber wasn't even like its own separate discipline, and I think it was you, Sharon, that said, or maybe Margaret, you said, someone said, every 2 years your technical skills become obsolete. So just thinking about the past 5 years, how has the field of cyber changed? Like what changes and trends have you seen that have kind of come and gone, and where do you think we're headed? What trends do you think we will see moving forward in the future?
Okay, I can start out just since my picture's there, at least on mine in the front here. Cyber has really sort of moved from being the responsibility of a single individual to, now we have several teams in some cases in organizations. So it's a team responsibility. And so this has created this huge demand at the time for cyber professionals. At the same time, we see the introduction of artificial intelligence into the discipline. And so if you look at technology like IBM Watson, that system that I think won at a chess game, well, now it's being used for automating threat analysis and so in labs, we're even seeing computer-generated responses for incident response here. And so I think this is going to result in an eventual automation of some more entry-level routine tasks, such as what you would see in a security operations centers, and even with basic security auditing skills. A lot of that can be automated as well. And I believe that it's going to continue to drive security upwards as a senior level role within organizations here. And it's going to necessitate that cyber professionals have critical thinking skills and advanced degrees. So it's a very good thing that you're going on for your bachelor's. I think a bachelor's is absolutely necessary, and would encourage folks to continue on for master's, in fact, in the field.
So I'm just going to jump in. I think in the just the past few years, I don't think we have to go back 5, but the most major trends that in the national security intelligence world really didn't have I don't want to say, it wasn't that it wasn't valued, but it wasn't valued to the level that other sources are. So that's kind of double speak for saying, so do you all know what open source is? Open source is anything you punch in Google, Yahoo, Bing, whatever it is you can find on the net. We're not talking the dark web, we're just talking regular internet here. So open source has become a tool, a very prized and valuable tool in the past several years to find bad guys, bad actors, bad things, criminal engagements, if you will, or soon to be criminal engagements. And what I've seen in the past, in my former hat at the Department of Homeland Security, is that social media is huge, right? I mean, the president tweets all the time. Everyone's got either a real or fake Twitter account. The proliferation of Facebook, which I hear young people don't even use anymore because all their grandparents are using it, so hence it's no longer cool. So everyone's now migrated to IG, and if you don't have an INSA account, then you're clearly nobody. But my point to all this is that young people have really, at an early age, grasped and learned and they've evolved, and I'm talking about you all, with this open source social media trend. And this is going to be huge in the future, because this is where for crowdsourcing, for artificial intelligence, and on the national security side, really just having an extra set of tools to find people who might want to do us harm. And on another point is that government and industry, I see now, are partnering more with each other. In the past, government would say, what are you doing? What do you know? And industry is like, whoa, we don't want to share anything with you, because if we give you an inch, you're going to take a mile, and we don't want you in our knickers. But now what we have over at DHS is CISA has lots of partnerships with private industry, with critical infrastructure. Those are gas, your electrical lines. And this is a two-way street to share information. And what CISA, this is Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, also does is that if they are aware of an intrusion, they will put up, and I'm saying they'll put up on their website instructions of a patch, or how to call in and share how you've been hacked or not hacked, or intrusions. And then there's lots of information sharing, which didn't happen several years ago. So the knowledge and the awareness has pushed us, or I'd like to say inspire us, to work together between industry and government.
Exactly. And I look at the focus on these smart devices that we have. Your refrigerators at home, smart TVs, the cell phones, and we don't have any privacy. And it's important that we understand how to protect ourselves while using these devices. So that's going to be a challenge coming up years.
Yeah,
I wholeheartedly agree with you, Sharon. I don't want my fridge or Safeway or Harris Teeter tracking me, but darn it, if I'm going to save 75 cents, I am going to give them my number.
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly. With these trends that we're seeing, and several of you mentioned going towards this team-based approach to cyber, and I mentioned AI and open source social media. So with all of these trends that we see coming up, what are some of the different career paths that someone who's interested in cyber and trying to figure out what they should do, what is some of the career paths that they can take as they're trying to get into the field?
Okay, one of the things that because I advise a lot of students who come in and say, well, by the time they graduate, some students don't even know at the time still what they want to do within cyber. And so I point them up to the CyberSeek site. This was a joint effort with DHS, NIST, CompTIA. And if you go up to cyberseek.org, you'll see that NIST has defined about 31 different specializations within cybersecurity. And so there are roles for everyone within cyber. And as an example, over at Mason, when I teach at Mason as well as an adjunct, I will sometimes have students that may not do as well in some of the foundational security courses, and I'll recommend to them that they think about going into networking or database and do something they really enjoy doing and have an aptitude for, because again, cyber is infusing all areas of IT. And I tell them all roads lead to Rome, in that you can go from any of these IT roles eventually into cyber. But the key is to be good at really what you're doing. But you can be a computer forensic investigator if you wanted to go for law enforcement. But more to the point, those are the same tools that we would use for incident response when we're defending a network. But cyber is required in systems administration, within database administration. We often have people on our audit teams that, or even on our teams get a contract for securely configuring a new database or an upgrade to a database. And so all of these different areas have IT in them if you look.
So I'm gonna go out on a limb and say, what job will not be IT or cyber related in the very near future? The sheer fact that COVID-19 has shut us all down so that we are now talking heads on the screen instead of sharing a stage with each other, I think is testament to the power of IT. I'm also going to throw in that, again, some of these systems are not as secure as others. So that's So that's an example right here and now. But in the short term, if you're looking for something interesting to do, I would throw that question back and say, what are you really interested? Are you a gamer? Do you love video games? Well, guess what? You're going to have to, when you design these video games, how do you protect it so that other hackers don't hack in and steal wholesale parts of your games? That's a very elementary one. Are you into law enforcement? Do you want to protect the community? Well, law enforcement, oh my gosh, they are so desperate and need really smart IT cyber folks to wear all types of different hats. I'll give you an example. DHS, Department of Homeland Security, ICE, Homeland Security Investigations opened a center. It's called the Angel Watch out in Fairfax County. And you're like, what is that? This is a center to combat sex trafficking of children predominantly. So if a known child pedophile or trafficker is leaving from the US and is traveling, pick a country, Turkestan. Well, DHS, ICE, local state law enforcement will work with the Turkestan, which you all know is a fake country, their law enforcement to track the movement of the sex trafficker, pedophile, bad guy, whatever it is. That's just one example. State, local, Department of Justice, they all have some sort of cybersecurity / law enforcement to combat sex trafficking, child trafficking. That's just, again, just a microcosm. Any business, really, any business that you go into is going to be an IT, cyber. That's going to be one of the foundational layers. When I worked on Capitol Hill back in the Stone Ages in 1998, the CEO of Burger King came in to meet with my then boss, Congressman Tom Davis of Fairfax County. And he said, we're an IT company. And it took everything for all of us to hold our composure and not laugh, because Burger King is 1997, not really an IT company. But we played along, and my boss was like, okay, so how are you an IT company? And the CEO proceeded to explain that, look, they're an IT company, everything with sourcing their meat, their potatoes, how they do logistics, just the term now is just-in-time logistics, so you don't have warehouses full of, pineapples rotting. But back then, they talked about just essentially they're moving goods at the rate of what the consumers want and need, and it's fresh. And so essentially, it's an IT business. So we laughed, and now I guess, laughs on us. So I'm going to go on a limb and say pretty much anything you do in the future, it's going to be cyber. You want to go to a restaurant, the best one back in the day, we'd have to open a phone book or call somebody you knew in the local area and say, hey, where's a good place to eat and where's a terrible place not to eat? And now you can pick up your clever phone, and my old company, which provides Google Maps with all of that beautiful imagery, you can pop in, and all those other companies that drive around like Trimble with their 360 digital mapping camera on top of their VWs, mapping out the streets. You can see what the restaurants look like. And now with Yelp, if it's good, if it's bad, if it's really not safe to eat there. So that's the future, and it's here.
And I agree. The student needs to focus on what they love, their background, because there is something out there for everyone. And just to come up with the list, you have like Chief Information Security Office, Forensic, Information Security Analyst. You can be a penetration tester. If you want to just hack stuff, do the penetration tester, security architect, anything. It's out there. So it depends on what you want to do.
And there are tons of jobs in the government if you're interested and you have great detecting skills. Many of our 3-letter agencies are always looking for smart people to be able to maneuver open source, and also to cull information from social media. And there are companies out there that probably have lots of patents on how they do it. But if you're clever enough and you think there's a better way to search, this is the time. This is the time to be alive.
Very good.
Yeah, so far I agree. I agree that cybersecurity, in cybersecurity you can find your passion. So far, I personally was exposed to got exposed to data loss prevention, which was very interesting for me. threat and vulnerability management is another field. Also, security operations center. Also, there are some risk management, um, identity access management, um, cryptography management, a lot. So it's very, very interesting field where the most common goal is, the one goal is to protect the information. Mhm.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you have to be passionate about this is in any job about what you're doing in order for you to be able to push through. For those of, I know we have several NOVA students on here. I posted a link in the chat that you can access if you're still kind of confused about what it is that you enjoy doing, what you're passionate about. You can go to the Career Services webpage, the Nova Career Services webpage, and go through Focus 2, and it'll kind of help you flesh out some of your passions and the things that you enjoy so you can get a better idea of what direction you should be going. I know we also
Hey, Brittany, can I just, one pause. Those are all great resources, but I would also caution that your first job, it doesn't need to be your love. It does not need to be the love of your life. It doesn't need to be like the best ice cream you've ever had, ever, right? Your first job, the whole purpose of that job is for you to get some skills, to learn some skills, learn from them, learn from the people, learn from the leadership, learn. Because everybody who's 20 years old knows everything. I got that. I was 20. We were all 20 once too. And boy, we knew everything. But the reality is people have done some of these things and they've learned. So you should learn on their time and get better. And once you get better, then you can jump to the next job. And maybe that next job is your passion or it opens other doors. But don't be so chicken that you just sit at home and say, look, I only want to work for this, this one industry that only does this one thing, because it's probably not going to happen. You have to go and make some of this happen, make those connections, and then you jump. I call it lily padding. You just jump, you're like a little frog, you jump from one lily pad to another, but you got to get on a lily pad first.
Yes, I definitely agree with you. I know several students that I've worked with who have gone into internships and they're like, I don't really know about this internship. And I'm like, just take it because it's experience. Just take the internship, get the experience, and you don't know what it could lead to. It could lead
Absolutely.
to anything. If nothing else, it's going to lead to a network, which is very important in searching for jobs and getting jobs. A lot of it has to do with who you know as well. So I totally agree. What you do, your first job probably won't be that thing that you love the most, but you get experience, which is what it's all about. I know we have several teachers on here. We have several high school students and parents as well. So this next question is more for the high school students who maybe aren't doing dual enrollment classes through NOVA with our cybersecurity program, but they're interested. So what are some of the things that they can do while they're in high school to kind of get them going in cybersecurity?
I'm gonna ask Sharon to address that if first, I think, because you may have contacts, and then I can offer up some from my perspective.
Okay. Well, most of the students, I tell them to try to find some type of cyber camp during the summer. Virginia Tech hosts nice sites. I think Nova STEM, they have different sites, and they just go out and try to get the knowledge, understand, network with other students. And SANS, which is one of the trusted largest sources of information security training, sometimes they offer free resources for high school students in the area.
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with, because I teach at a college level, with the high school resources. Some that I do post on my CyberWatch Facebook site. But there's, I would encourage them to get interested in the competitions, because we see, the
Girls Go Cyber.
Yes, yeah, and there are a lot of different competitions. I mean,
National Cyber League.
yes, National Cyber League as well. Yeah, and actually, National Cyber League is sponsored by one of the organizations I'm on the leadership team for that is National Cyber Watch. So, but anyway, yeah, definitely with the cybersecurity competitions.
And try to promote getting the girls involved. I had maybe 15 last year, and they just feel like it's for boys, and it's not. And once they came into the class and they shared experience with other girls, so hopefully next year I will have more girls.
Yeah, I was doing some research and I found this statistic that said that women make up about 20% of the cyber workforce.
Yes.
So what are some things that we can do to support the advancement of women and also people of color and other people who might have marginalized identities in cyber?
You know, one of the things I want to touch on here is that, you know, I've always worked in this field 40 years, and I had never experienced any overt discrimination to being, you know, the only woman in most of my environments that I was working in. But when I started teaching college, I'd come across this article that said that women are perceived as being less technically astute than men. So I thought, well, that's strange. I'd never, you know, had this problem at work. I'll see what happens here. So I had, you know, several classes at Nova, and I gave, and you know, bear in mind that my students at Nova tend to be somewhat older than the typical 18 to 20-year-old. So I gave them a resume, and on that resume, I had the same resume from a working professional friend of mine, and I put a man's name on half of them, I put a woman's name on the other half of them, and I found that the woman's name, the resume was scored lower, putting the students in the position of being a hiring manager, than the male resume. And what was really interesting to me was the fact that the woman's resume was scored lower by women as well as by men. And so I think that we have this inherent bias, but not only just men, but women as well, that, you know, that we're not as technically astute. And that is not the case at all. The women in my classes do, you know, exceedingly well. I mean, when I look at my stars, if you would, these women that, and some of them are career transitioners, some of them are just out of high school. These are the women, some of them lack confidence. They have been told, I guess, a lot of times that maybe they're not as technically astute as their male counterparts, but I will tell you, they get it quickly, you know, and so many of them do, you know, very well for themselves when they leave.
Okay.
So my recommendation, though, it would be for all people, if you are interested and you think this is a field that is going to grow, it's going to grow, I assure you, and you want to be a part of this action, there are tons of free events. There are so many professional organizations. You live in, for goodness sakes, the capital of the free world here. You're not in the middle of nowhere where, I won't say anything about the middle of nowhere. Anyways, the point is you're here and there are tons of professional organizations and you don't have to be a part of it. You know what? You have a student ID. You email them. In this day and age, like 20 years ago, okay, that was like the dark ages. We didn't have electricity. You have a phone, you have a email, you email the organizers. Everybody's information's on the net. Do a little detective work and tell them, look, hi, I'm a student at Nova. I'm interested in X. I see you have an event. It's $600 to go, but I'm a student. I'd like to know if I could just go and attend pro bono. And you know what? I was on the U.S. Geospatial Intelligence Foundation, and we let students in free, because that's the future. And we had and then we actually came up with events for students to attract more students. So these organizations are more than happy to welcome you. I mean, some of the stuff they talk about is a little esoteric and it's a little bit out there, but it doesn't matter. You get in the room, you walk around, stand up straight, introduce yourself, and just tell them I'm here to learn. This is fascinating. And then you know what? I bet you one or two of those people you're gonna connect with. And afterwards you say, hey, I'd love to learn more about what you do. I saw you speak, or you have to make those human connections. Businesses don't do business with other businesses. People do business with other people. People are going to give you an internship, they're going to give you a job, but they're not going to give you anything if they don't know who the heck you are. So this is the challenge. And I think in the past, for women, there weren't that many women in any of these fields. So how do you know them? And you have to get, you go through the process, but now there are more women in the cyber field, and there's really no excuse not to know at least somebody. And even if you don't know that person, somebody is an intermediary. So for anybody from high school to transitioning professionals, I encourage you, go to these events, just tell them I'm transitioning, or I'm in school, or I'd like to volunteer for you. That's an excellent way to go to any event for free, which is, I'd love to volunteer. What can I do? Can I work at your welcome desk? Can I register people? Get to know the movers and shakers, and that's how you become part of the process.
And I wanted to inject here, because you talked about the professional organizations,
Right.
and there's the Women in Cyber, or Women's Society of Cyberjutsu, that they do a lot of training, both for women as well as men, but their focus is on helping give women a leg up. The Women in Cybersecurity, we have a local branch that's run by the commandant of NSA's School of Cryptography, or cryptology, sorry. But INSA, Nova, ISACA, these are organizations that are very active within Northern Virginia in security, and give student discounts on membership. And as you said, you get involved, and you don't just go and sit, but you get out and meet people and say, what can I do to help?
Yes.
Mhm.
I'll make another plug for, there's another organization called INSA. It's the INSA, I forget what the I is, National Security Association. It's in Boston, and they have all sorts of great programmings. You can volunteer. Again, if you don't try, then you'll never know.
Yeah, I think all of you, what you're getting around to is network, network, network. It's all about building that network of people around you. And as much as we are on social media, or maybe not, but I know that several students use social media. Use it to your advantage. Just like you search hashtags for anything else, you can search hashtags for cybersecurity. You can get on LinkedIn and join groups that are focused on cybersecurity. So use social media to your advantage. When I was looking for a job, I'm not in cyber, but when I was looking for a job, I used social media as kind of my job searching tool to kind of help me connect with people, and that's how I got a job. So use it to your advantage. And I know someone was asking, what do I do if I don't have any experience in cybersecurity, and I'm interested in the field? And I know we have several NOVA students who are specifically at NOVA because they are trying to change careers. They're trying to pivot in their careers, and they're career switchers. So what advice would you give to someone who is trying to make a career switch? How do they use the experience that maybe they gained in another field to apply to some skills in cyber?
Well, I think it's important that you just said it. How do you apply the skills that they gained? I always tell students who are in these cases, because I did a study one time and found that a large number of my students, probably about at least 50%, were these career switchers that already, even some had degrees, but not in IT. And that is that you look to your present company, and you look and see, gee, how can I maybe let them know that I'm interested in IT, interested in cyber, and maybe even start working with some of the folks there. But yeah, definitely, again, it all comes with, at the end of the day, what skills do you have? That's what the employer is going to look at. And so it takes a lot of time and effort to build those skills and be able to capture them on a resume, and perhaps highlight the IT experience that they've had, that they within these other existing jobs, but also the experiential learning that comes with the competitions. I tell my students, don't even ask me for a letter of recommendation to a senior institution if you've not competed or done any extracurricular activities and really helped out.
I agree. And like what was said before, just reach out to different companies and organizations, and be willing to volunteer a couple of hours or maybe a summer to get yourself in, to get that experience. And some companies, they like to teach you how they want you to be taught sometimes as well. So it all depends on what you're looking for.
And if you even want to start even more locally, is there something in your new neighborhood or your community that is crying out for some cyber or IT help? Volunteer and set that up. And then you know what? You're learning in the process, you're helping out your community, and that becomes a fantastic bullet and talking point when you go and interview, because the interviewer, I've hired folks for when I was in the private sector and in the government. We ask, you know, what relevant experience can you tell us about X? Well, then you can say, well, I volunteered for this thing. We had, no IT connectivity for this certain program, and this is how I set it up. This is what I did. And it shows your ingenuity. It shows your initiative, and it shows you've got guts to take something on. So even if you're terrified of picking up the phone and you don't know anybody in industry, you could always volunteer in your community, and they're desperate for help. Many of them are, because as you know, they're run by senior citizens with lots of time on their hands, but not a lot of cyber awareness.
Right. Nonprofits are one area I tell my students to look at, because they're in desperate need. Most of those people are not IT people. They have no money. And just say, hey, you know what? I'll do a security assessment for you, give you some recommendations of where you can get yourself healthy a little bit in exchange for a letter of recommendation.
Exactly. Good.
Yeah, I always tell students to remember that just because it wasn't paid experience doesn't mean it wasn't good experience. So use get experience however you can, whether that is volunteering, unpaid internships, whatever, because it's going to be something that you can add to your resume to speak to the skills that you have. So at this point, we're coming up on 11:50. We have about 12 minutes left, and I want to make sure that we can get some of the questions that students have typed in the chat in. So if you have questions, please type them in the chat, and I'm going to scroll up to the top and start with the questions at the top. And just ask them in the order that they come. So I think we've already addressed what to do if you don't have any experience in cyber and how to kind of break into the field. The next question is, are there cybersecurity job opportunities for immigrants? Is there any background check issues for people who have been in the US for a few years?
So I'm going to take a stab at this since I just came out of DHS. The term immigrant could mean many things. If you are of legal status, but not a US citizen, but you're a legal permanent resident, that shouldn't be an impedance for any job that I know of in the IT field. Most jobs in the intelligence community do require you to be a US citizen and have this full background check, but that's later. And if you don't have status, that's a different question. But if you are a legal permanent resident or you have a green card essentially in the US, then it shouldn't be an issue for you to obtain an IT job.
Yeah, I can follow up on that because I've had some experience within the private sector too. One of my project managers, and we were on several contracts together with Department of Education, with Postal Service. He had a green card. He was from India and held a public trust. And so, that's a clearance that some agencies will require that does not require U.S. citizenship. He was able to hold that. So, and therein, we, even though we're the seat of federal government, we still have quite a number of private organizations, financial organizations like Capital One, like Freddie Mac, and all of these financial organizations, in some cases, are even willing to sponsor, and they have huge IT and cyber teams. And so, there are opportunities. Maybe some of them are limited because of the number of ones that will require you to hold, even as a contractor, be able to obtain a clearance, but that requires citizenship. But they're there.
Thank you. Next question is, what certification would you advise me to take before I finish my associate's degree?
Well, I'm not advising anybody necessarily to stop focusing on their degree requirements for certification, but I think that by the time you graduate, maybe you spend a couple of weeks over the winter intersession or, the summer if you have some time between classes, and at a minimum hold a Security Plus, because most of our entry-level jobs in this area are going to require Security Plus. That said, certification, I think, needs to be, you need to think about what area that you're interested in specialization, and the senior level certs that come with time should be focused on that area to demonstrate skills. But you know, I hold probably about 6, 7 different certifications, and my most valuable ones are my CISSP, my C-RISC because I do audits, and my CIPP, which is a Certified Information Privacy Professional for Governments, because I do examine privacy policies. And so again, you know, it depends on what you want to trot out. If I'm doing, I managed a team of ethical hackers, I trot out my certified ethical hacker cert, that one, you know, so it depends on where your interests are.
Okay, and if you have more questions about industry certifications, our topic for last week's session, or maybe the week before last session, was industry certifications. So that recording will be up on YouTube soon. So if you just check our Nova Systemic YouTube page, you can find all of the recorded sessions that we've done prior to this one. And that one will be going up soon. The next question is for you, Margaret, specifically. What is the website that shows career paths in cyber?
Oh, that is, and I can type it in here, it is cyberseek.org. And so it's a wonderful site because it shows you the entry-level pathways into cyber jobs. And I use it for my students all the time, perfect too for high school as well. And it then shows you the entry level, the intermediate positions, and then the jobs at a senior level that you can transition into, you know, and so, and it also shows you the certifications that are associated with each of these different positions. And so a lot of times I tell my students to do a gap analysis, if you would, to use some of the job titles that they find in these specializations. It'll list out all the different job titles, put those in and start looking at job ads in Monster and Dice and Indeed, and see what, you know, what are they looking for? What are the hard skills, the soft skills, the certifications, the tools that they're using, those types of things, and you know, and kind of get a list of the skills that maybe they would need to have if they're thinking about going into that career. So cyberseek.org.
Yeah, she dropped the link in the chat. I think this is the last question that we have. Annie says, I'm wondering if there is any website that any teachers can recommend for me to find any cyber volunteer jobs. I've tried to learn some strategies at home during my quarantine time. Self-learning is a bit hard. Yes, self-learning can be challenging.
Oh, hey, can I just jump in real quick on this one? So if you're passionate about animals, animal shelters, besides walking the dogs, they may have some IT challenges, and or their system needs to be updated. They just may need someone to fat finger punch in some data and do data entry. But these are and if you don't like dogs and cats, for God's sakes, don't call the shelters, because you're going to be very unhappy there. But this is an example. If you're into dogs and cats, shelters is a good way. If you have a favorite, whatever it is, it could be sports or a restaurant, and you find like that you go often and they seem to need a little help in one area or not, just volunteer. And once you get in and you look around, and you're going to see some of the issues and spot some of the things they may need help on, or the owners or the leaders there may say, we need someone to do X beyond Y. Can you do it? And you're like, sure, because you're there to volunteer. But just get out and learn, because the hardest thing during this pandemic is that we are all sequestered and we don't have these opportunities to go out and meet people, the human interaction to learn that way. But now that we're already in phase 2 in Virginia, phase 3 is probably going to be in a couple weeks. This is a great time just to reach out and volunteer. I think the job market is going to slowly spring back, but until then, if you can volunteer anywhere, I highly recommend you do it, because it's just time you're wasting now by not doing it. And if you have it, it's going to be a boon, and it's going to give you something to talk about.
All right, we have time for maybe one more question. Nancy asks, how does the MTA Security Fundamentals certification enhance a student's resume? I think any certification will enhance your resume because it demonstrates that you have some level of mastery of skills. So I think it's not just specific to anyone, but I mean, you all can certainly chime in. I'm not a cyber professional.
Well, as an entry-level certification, I'm not sure if it satisfies the DoD instruction. I would have to look at that, the 8570 that or I think that's been replaced now. But as you said, it shows the initiation, or that you have initiative rather, sorry, to pursue this, especially on your own. I would, though, again, gets back to that, looking at Indeed and Monster, look and see what the employer is looking for in this before, because I've seen in some cases, some very, people asking about very unusual certs that are not being requested. And later in your career, you can differentiate with some, oddball senior level certs that, like my CIPP is not asked for a lot, but it certainly is a differentiator when I have a resume that's presented, but initially I think you go for Security Plus, because we know for a fact that people are looking right now for Security Plus.
So can I chime in real quick on this, not so much on the certification, but because you brought up Indeed and Monster. If you all aren't already, you might want to start a profile on LinkedIn. I know one of the other ladies had mentioned that. That's a great idea. And have a real nice professional, and again, you don't have to go and have a professional headshot, but try not to take one where you're at a party and it's 2 in the morning and there's a goat in the background, okay? You want to project professionalism. And start that profile and start making friends. And when I say friends, this is not a Facebook friends, this is a professional network of friends, and start building that and reaching out to people. That is an easy peasy way to do networking if you're shy. And you're going to find out what other people are following and what is interesting to them, maybe of interest to you. And that's one way to dovetail into asking them to go to coffee with you once we are lifted from our quarantine. But these are easy steps. I will also caution you, coming from the intelligence community, that whatever you post online, even though you think you will delete it later, it lives on in perpetuity. So it's not going to be as easy as deleting it. So when you post something and it's sketchy, and you think later on you may not want your own child or your mom to see this, then don't post it. Because you know what, your employers are not stupid. And I will tell you, we scrub social media. What is this individual like before we hire them into the department, when I was at the Department of Homeland Security and when I was in the private sector. And they're going to scrub social media. And if your name and these images pop up, then all your hard work will be for naught. So if that's one nugget of wisdom that I didn't have 20 plus years ago when I started, because the internet was like a weird thing and nobody got on it, I would just caution you, again, when you post something, think twice, maybe even 3 times, because your name, your background, your image, all searchable.
I agree.
Yes, I agree as well. That you have to think about who is going to be seeing this down the road, just not just the in the moment impact. Well, we want to respect time. So that's all the time that we have for questions, but I want to thank everyone for being on this call today, and especially to our panelists. Thank you so much. You shared so much insightful information, and I know I learned a lot, and I'm sure our students and our parents and teachers who are on here have also learned a lot as well.